Hello, everybody. My name's James. Welcome to another Planet FPL podcast. Little one with a little bit of a difference today, where I'm delighted to introduce to you our advanced tier patron mini league winner, Chris Duckworth. How are you, Chris?
I'm good, thank you, James. How are you?
Yes, very well, thank you, mate. Congratulations on a brilliant FPL season, which we'll come on to in a second. I've just found out as well that you're actually using my patron to fleece me of money as you've become so good at this game. But for the benefit of the listeners who may not know you, tell them a little bit about yourself, mate.
I'm a Blackburn Rovers fan for my sins, so obviously that doesn't drive my interest in FPL in any way. I've been playing since 2007, 2008, so a fairly long time, but really taking it seriously since 2019, 2020, when I got involved in Planet FPL and a few other podcasts, and yeah, really started taking the game a little more seriously than the odd family mini league, etc.
How important is Blackburn to you?
Yeah, it's a big thing. Obviously, yeah, it's nice to sort of have a playoff challenge this year, although we managed to contrive to throw it away just before the end of the season. Yeah, hopefully we'll manage to hang on to JDT over the summer. And I know there are a few suitors at the moment, but we'll hopefully hang on to him and yeah, have another bash next year.
JDT being John Dale Thomason, who is
Indeed.
Blackburn manager at the moment, has made an impression in his first year. You were quite worried that he might end up at Feyenoord, but Tottenham's inability to get Arne Slot means that we think that he'll be staying with Rovers. Got a good shout for promotion next year, do you think? It'll be a tough league now, isn't it?
It is. Obviously, those sides coming down are gonna make it even tougher. But I'd like to think we'll be around the playoffs if we can recruit. Obviously, losing Diaz is going to be a blow this summer.
Yeah.
Hopefully we can replace those goals and yeah, have another bash next year at the playoffs.
Let's talk about this FPL season then, because there's something that you said you played for a long time, 2007-08 was your first season. 84,000 rank. I don't think that's quite like an 84,000 rank in 2023. Because let's be honest, probably up until 1920, as you said, there's nothing to write home about there so much. Then 62,000, 109,000, 6,000 last year, 3,972 this year. So it's back to back top 7K finishes. What's changed?
I think, as I mentioned, the 1920, I had a colleague start work and really get me into the world of FPL content. So before that, I was very much a family mini league player, odds and ends here and there. I think that influence of the content and the community and really getting involved in what FPL is and what it could be. Actually playing for rank. I'd previously never played for rank in any way. It was always very much a mini league focus, and obviously now I very much play for a an overall rank and mini league and sort of more serious mini league ranks than previously. I think also the last 2 seasons I've removed myself from FPL Twitter a lot more, so I still have an account, but I don't use that actively, and I think that's given me a lot more clarity of thought in the game and able to make my own decisions really.
Most in the bio will have already seen your Twitter handle, which is
FPL_Coke_0.
okay. That's a random one. Why?
James, you know why. That one is derived from an incident on a Planet FPL meetup, which involved a rather large game of Monopoly and me being the only non-drinking member and being christened Coke Zero for the day by Mr. Ricky Saunders and our Monopoly host.
So it could have been worse. You could have been like FPL Carlsberg or something. So no, it's not too bad. Mr. Coke Zero. Are you not a drinker generally then?
No, don't drink.
Does that help? Because we always
Yeah,
say don't
sometimes.
drink, but seriously, we don't say don't drink an FPL, right?
Yeah, no, yeah. So yeah, obviously, I don't have that issue of having a few and then trying to make decisions. No, probably in hindsight, it does give a bit of a hand.
Are you quite a template player? That's the first thing. If I look at someone who's got that rank 2 years in a row, and I think probably not gone wild with picks. Like it worked once for you, will it work twice in a row? What's the story here?
No, I'm very much a template manager. My first look is always at what the herd is doing effectively. What are the pack doing, and generally I will only swing against if I really feel there is a reason to do so. I think for me swinging it, especially early in the season, it's a case of hanging on with. I mean, this season I don't think I dipped outside the top million
You
all
didn't.
season. I don't think I was about 800k the start. And that once you have a good start, staying with the pack and making relatively template moves is a logical option until we get towards the business end of the season, when you can try and sort of throw the odd curveball, and occasionally they'll work and occasionally they'll backfire, as I'm sure we'll come on to.
I mean, look, there's plenty to be said for going against, and there's plenty of people that it works really well for, but it is a common thing that most, not all, most content creators, when I speak to them, will say, yeah, generally follow it. I'm conscious of what other people are doing. But then if you're not on Twitter, how are you conscious? Where does the consciousness come from of what other people are doing?
So a lot of it is content. So I am a relatively big content consumer. Obviously I listen to pretty much all of your content, and Who Got the Assist, the big listener of those guys, and a few other of the FPL podcasts. So I listen to probably 20 plus hours of podcasts a week.
Wow.
So big content.
17 of that's mine, isn't it?
Yeah. No, obviously, I consume a lot of content, so I get a lot of what is being said in the community, and trying to get a variety of it as well, not just listening to one podcast going, oh, that's what everyone's doing because that's what they say. Actually going, what are you're trying to gauge it that way, but also trying to look at things like EO and those sort of things out there, and also the transferred in is who is being transferred in heavily is available on the FPL website. It's quite easy to see who's being transferred in heavily, and you get a good feel in that for what is going on.
If we look at this game week 1 team of yours, there's a lot of what I would have said was popular picks back in game week 1 that you selected. The trinity of offensive premium defenders: Cancelo, Trent Alexander-Arnold, Reece James. Matty Cash was semi-popular at 5 million. It was kind of a him or Trippier. That looks like a funny choice now, doesn't it? And Ramsdale in goal, not so much, maybe a bit of a differential. But Neto, Martinelli, and Salah was certainly popular. Luis Diaz is in there, and I think most people wanted a midfielder around about that price bracket. Jesus, Haaland up front, Danny Ward, reserve goalkeeper, Nico Williams, Andreas Pereira, and a 4.5 forward. That's quite template, isn't it, at the start?
Yeah, absolutely. I said that is part of my method is to go template early on. Try and go with that, especially when you look at it and it feels like a strong template. The template is a template for a reason generally.
Yes, the template doesn't always win.
No,
especially early on. Not last year, but I want to say the year before, there were a lot of people sort of like 3-4 million ranks or so, like a good sort of 7-8 weeks win, because generally the template was failing quite a bit. And I remember even, I want to say game week 1 was horrific one year, and there was a lot of people putting wildcards game week 2. Just go, this hasn't worked. Christ, got to get off it. What's the contingency then if that fails?
I mean, generally, I am a hold the wild card in hand as long as you can manager. That's generally, obviously this season was a little different with the World Cup. So I think I went game week 8 in the end for the wild card, for the first wild card. But generally, it's a case of try and pick a good starting team. So as of yet, I've not had to pull that early wild card, but I guess that would be the get out of jail free card would be use that. You've got a wild card. If you go wrong, use your chip and get out of there if you can.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned wildcard game week 8. When you use your chips this year, is exactly the same as me. It's just, what did I finish? 225 or something? Yeah, there's just about 220,000 places between us. So we both wildcarded game week 8. We both triple captain game week 22, which would have been the Marcus Rashford triple captaincy. Yep. We both wildcarded in game week 26. You had a little bit more success there than me straight away. You bench boosted 29, which is what I did. And you free hit 32. So why have we finished so different, Chris?
I mean, I guess the obvious answer is the players we picked.
It's the right answer, isn't it?
Yeah. No, I mean, I think this season with the World Cup, for me, that was the relatively obvious strategy. When I mapped it out, I wasn't necessarily set on 8. I'd sort of I'd consider a slightly earlier wild card, but obviously the game week 7 cancellations kind of played into game week 8 being the obvious week, and I think that drove that for me was that the fact that happened. It was sort of like, oh, actually, this is now the time to go. Let's not mess around. See, the Rashford one was a bit touch and go, but again, it just felt like everything aligned that was the time to go. Again, it was a popular move, but it seemed like I think especially with the triple captain, where it is one of those chips that is all or nothing. That if you go with the popular one and it fails, everyone else is in the same boat as you.
So at the end of game week 7, which was the week of sadly, obviously the Queen's passing, where all the games were postponed. At the end of that week, I was 1.8 million. You were 586,000. Is that what the main difference is here? Exactly what you said, that kind of template start.
I mean, yeah. I think we tracked very relatively similarly, but that start was obviously that the fact I went with the template early on got that start in.
And then obviously you did really well off that wild card, and jumps quite up pretty much straight away from there. Some of your selections you went for on that wild card included Alexander Isak, who was quite popular later on. James Maddison, who had a good little spell. Leicester had that real swing of fixtures around about that time. Trippier, Cancelo, Perisic, interestingly, still kind of popular defensively at that point as premiums. No Liverpool in there though. Haaland's obviously a constant in there. De Bruyne was in there. I don't think our wildcarded much different to what you did. I remember I went Jared Bowen, who actually did quite well straight away, but not a lot else afterwards. Reflecting on that wild card, were you happy with it?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was one of the things that I'm not a particularly hit happy manager. I steer away from taking hits where I can. So I think there were a few players I didn't get Kieran Trippier until game week 8. I'd love to have had him earlier on, but I could not crowbar a way of wedging him into that team without taking hits. And I think that there are several players there that I'd quite liked earlier on, that it felt like the right time for me. And I think again, it was an early wildcard, but knowing we had that World Cup coming up, you're able to be a bit more attacking in a little bit of a way, and take a few shorter term hits where in a normal season you're kind of planning probably for that main chunk of the season with that first wild card.
I think I want to say you only took 5 during the course of the season. Yeah. So that's interesting though. So even if a player was to break like a Trippier, who okay, this is going a certain way, he's definitely becoming template quite quickly. You don't feel the need to, I've got to get this straight away at any cost. You'll wait for the right moment to make that happen without taking the hit.
I'll try to generally, yeah. And unless it's an absolute glaring error, or if I've got an injury or something like that, and I'm at a point where it's the obvious thing to do. But generally, I will steer away from hits at pretty much all costs if I can.
Because is that influenced by the fact he's a defensive player as well? Do you think?
No, I think I'll do that anywhere in the pitch. I think generally I'll carry. If I can put 11 players out that I think are good enough, I'll carry injured players, and I've done that in several other points in the season. Carried injured players on the bench for a few weeks just to avoid that 4-point hit. I'm just very much a believer in that 4 points are quite valuable at the end of the day, and 4 points at the end of the season can make quite a big difference. And hit unless it's an obvious player, they quite often don't pay back very quickly.
No, fair. Did you take a hit for Harry Kane in game week 38?
No, I already had him. No, sorry, I had 2 free transfers into game week 8. I had a spare free transfer.
Love it. You say you wasn't bothered about game week 37, or did you set yourself up to only be using one then?
I'd only use one.
Yeah, nicely done. What made you decide on the Rashford triple captaincy in 22? Because there was obviously a couple of Haaland opportunities around that as well.
Yeah, I think guaranteed minutes again. Again, I'm very stats orientated. I like that guaranteed. Marcus Rashford felt like he was going to play nigh on 180 minutes in over those 2 fixtures. In reality, Haaland was always a risk that you were going to play one, miss one. Play one, miss one. I think for me, Rashford was a banker. Again, great form at that point in the season. It felt like for me it felt like the obvious play.
So before that, when we got up to the break, you got yourself up to 67k. Sorry, you were at the break. What's your target at that point? Are you thinking this mythical top 10k or?
Yeah, I was top at the start of the season. I wanted a better last year.
So that was your target, new personal best, basically. It's ambitious.
Yeah.
Where do you sit on the debate of what a good rank is now?
Oh, I think now generally anything top 100k is a good rank. It is not an easy game. I know you touched on it before. That I look at that 84k I got in 7-8. And you look at that now, you think, yeah, that's not even. That I don't even count that as a top 100k.
I feel
It's
like there's
just
maybe 2 million players, or
I can
maybe
see
not
that
even that. Maybe I don't know.
about 85k probably.
Yeah, it was last. Yeah, there wasn't quite to that extent.
No, but I think the game has grown so much that the top 10k is a personal goal rather than a wider goal. I think if I'd have looked at it and gone, actually I've got 90k, 95k, I'd have been more than happy with the season. But I think at the start of the season you kind of always want to do a bit better than you did before, don't you? Ultimately,
Yeah, no, of course. Yeah, I'm still aiming for one day I'll get there. Maybe, Chris, maybe when I give up the content. It's interesting on your unlimited, still Trippier, Cancelo, James. Trippier was fairly spoke for itself, but it was no giving up at that point. Even at this point, these
mm-hmm.
premium defenders will come good, will they?
Yep.
Is that because everyone else was? Because I think it was still being widely held. And I know at that point, like you went double Chelsea defense. It was Kepa, Reece James, and they had the extra double, I want to say, when it was
Yep.
game week 19, because they had the additional Fulham fixture. Cancelo obviously turned out to be a disaster for many of us, but you still went pretty big defensively, mate.
Yeah, I think it's one of the things. I think with the value midfield, you didn't need at that time to get rid of them, and it was worth the risk. With the likes of Almiron was going well at that point.
Yeah,
Martinelli was cheap at his price. There were players there that you could get. Even Mitrovic, again was a more than adequate starter at that time to play. I didn't feel like you needed to get rid of those defenders at that point. It's not like previous seasons where you've needed the premium players. You've had to sort of scrimp and save elsewhere. This year you were able to go a little bit more aggressive with those players that could go big in defence.
it feels like a
Ironically,
hindsight one for many is I didn't have Kane enough.
yeah.
That feels, is that how you feel as well?
I think I'd have done slightly better with Kane, but I did have Kane a fair amount. So I don't know how many weeks, I can't remember off the top of how many weeks I had Kane, but I did have Kane. I think I had 13 or 14 starts of Kane. If I had him a fair amount
Yeah, I think
alongside
I saw
Haaland.
you got like exactly 100 of Harry Kane's FPL points, I think.
Yeah, so it's not too bad. So
No, no.
I did have him a fair amount, but yeah, again, if I could have gone there again, but then without him, I wouldn't have had Mitrovic. So I think not having Kane enabled that extra player elsewhere.
Is it an influence on? I've said this a lot in the past about people like Kane and Salah, and actually I've particularly used it with Bruno Fernandes in the past. But I've got a player there like Haaland, or in the past it's been Salah. I'm not moving this captaincy. Why am I going to pay X amount of money for a Harry Kane if I'm not going to give him the armband very often? Was that an influence on it, you think? And because therefore coming down to Mitrovic or Nunes as you had at a period as well, still enabled you to go to like Cancelo, James at that point?
Yeah, I personally try not to look at it in the captaincy respect. I try and look at it in more actually what can I do with those funds, whether I'm going to captain him or not. What can I do with that? That not having Kane enable me to get three better defenders ultimately. It's whether
Yeah.
if I was going to captain him, obviously that would have been an influence, but not having him got me three. It wasn't just I could have Kane. It enabled three better players ultimately. So I think that spread of funds this year, especially with Haaland and Salah for a lot of the season, it was there wasn't really a lot of room for Kane. Although I know a lot of us did manage to get in at several points, get in the three of them. But I think when you do that, you do cut elsewhere in your team.
I really struggled after the unlimited transfers for a few weeks. I actually dipped back into over 1 million. You dipped from 50,000 back up to 126,000. And that Rashford triple captaincy brought you back to almost your starting point, basically. And then you kicked on again from there. Were you concerned from the unlimited period, though, that suddenly it was red, 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 red?
Yeah, obviously I think I took one of my hits just after that actually to get Harry Kane in at that point. Was one of those that was one of those points where I realised again realised made an error, so did have to act at that point. But yeah, I think the thing is ultimately not to panic, especially when you've picked those wild cards. Generally, if you've picked what you believe are good players, they will come good, as long as it is not totally falling apart. If again try and hold as much as I can and believe, trust in what I've done, and believe where we are, and then stick to the plan and try not to throw it out straight away. I think there was temptation at a point to wildcard again straight after, as ASAP and try and fix it. But I think ultimately the decision was to try and hang on and wait.
I mean, it's interesting that week before the Rashford triple captaincy, you scored 78 points. Single game weeks, no doubles in that week. Single game week, 78 points, and it was a little bit of a red. Mm-hmm. Is there that as well? You're going, I'm scoring all right here.
Yeah, I think you do have to look at it and go, ultimately, when you're around that top 100k and into the top 10k, you can score some good scores, and you're getting you're scoring big scores and you're getting red arrows. And you go, well, hang on, everyone else is getting green arrows with this score. What's going on? And you've just got to remember that there are a lot of players around you that are also at this rank for a reason, ultimately. So, it's that thing of if you're going template, trust the template. Don't throw it out and go, oh, we're going to go differential now, because you can ruin your whole season in a matter of weeks by trying to be differential. And also, I think because I had the plan of the triple captain in 22, you have to build towards that.
There should be a lift.
Well,
the Manchester United double, yeah.
But also, you are looking at, well, I've got player. I don't want to waste transfers because I wanted to get Fernandes in for that week. You've already got Shaw. I think in that 78, Shaw actually got nut. Shaw didn't score in that 78 the week before the triple.
Correct.
But you're sort of thinking, want to hold Luke Shaw because why do I want to get rid of Luke Shaw? That doesn't make any sense. We've got you see, you're almost looking at what's to come and planning for that more than anything else. So
actually, strategy there a little bit like me, because actually, as we said, sort of in 17, you still went with James, Trippier, Cancelo. Cancelo and James have obviously become a problem. You've moved that about where Shaw's come in, Ben White's come in. You've ended up with double Newcastle with Sven Botman, and as you said, you got Kane in. That's essentially all you've done here. Is you've fought the fire and built yourself to a position that when you got to 22, you had Shaw, Rashford, and I'm going to add Bruno Fernandes as well.
Yeah.
Where'd you get that sort of strategy from?
I'll be honest, a lot of time sat tinkering on FPL team.
Shout out Peter Featherstone, who
yes.
let me down in game week 39 with my captaincy. He did not. Peter played very, very well.
No, but also it's a lot of just tinkering, trying to work out where things fit, and trying to work out how you can shuffle that budget. But again, trying to do it incrementally rather than taking the -12 and going, right, I want to get rid of all these defenders and I want to get to this team. Sort of planning it out and going, right, well, and there's an element of luck to it in that you are hoping that you don't get injuries. And I did have a relatively solid season in that I didn't get I didn't get any injuries at the wrong times. If you get an injury at the wrong time, you can be very stuck very quickly. But I was fortunate and got to a position where I could make the transfers with the free transfers and follow that plan that I had.
Good. Going into game week 26, obviously when you wildcard, it's also when I wildcarded. And it wasn't the original plan. The original plan was the week after. And then the FA Cup results happened, which included my team losing at Sheffield United. But I think I knew the night before, as soon as Leicester had lost to Blackburn, and there was a couple of other results, your own team, of course, obviously, that I knew I was going early. When did you know that you were wildcard in 26? Was it during that week and those cup results?
I was aiming for 26 because of the team I had. My contingency was to leave it for 27 if the fixture had gone the other way. So I was actually the other way around to you. I was thinking 26 suited me better. So I was aiming for 20. The plan was always 26, but with the backup that if it fell and made sense, I'd wait another week if I could. Effectively, as I mentioned before, I like to leave that wild card as late as possible, and plus planning the bench boost shortly after. I ideally wanted those as close together as possible. So I think I was planning that way round.
So game week 26 was the now well known when Liverpool beat Manchester United 7-0. You had no Liverpool.
Yep.
You still had a green arrow. How did you survive?
I've asked myself that a few times. I think obviously having Ivan Toney at that point, and he returned well, and Matoma again. With I think those first couple of weeks I had Matoma, he did me some good.
Yeah, and the irony is obviously you wouldn't have had those players got you 21 points in 26, those two players, which presumably you wouldn't have gone for as an Estupiñán clean sheet as well. You wouldn't have gone for if it wasn't for the upcoming doubles
Yeah,
for
exactly.
those two teams. So did you know when you were wildcard in 26, did you know, right, I'm on this bench boost 29 and free hit 32. You knew that.
Yeah, that was
Because
locked in there.
At that time there was a real split in strategy, and also there was obviously a real split between wildcard and 26 and wildcard and 27. So at that point, you obviously said you want to kind of follow a template quite a bit. At that point, how do you determine what's the influences? Does it come back to a gut feel?
Yeah, I think a lot of it goes back to gut feel, and also for me, it was you're looking at the fixtures and the players, almost trying to work out which players you want and who you feel are the best players at the best times, and then looking at what that suggests in terms of when they've got blanks and doubles and trying to fit them in around that, rather than sort of picking the strategy and then trying to wedge the players into that strategy, almost going, right, well, who do I definitely want? Or, I sat down with a bit of paper and sketching the players I know I want and that I want in that squad, and then work it out from there. And obviously there are some concessions where you look at players and go, oh, maybe they don't fit, or oh, I'd like to have them, but they're not quite right for this moment. But on the whole, trying to get that sort of the skeleton of your team laid out, and then look at what that means and work from there. Almost is my way of playing it.
The other thing that's really interesting is before the wild card, there was a double game week for Arsenal and Liverpool, particularly in game week 25, and you scored 115, which actually featured a -8, Chris. I don't know if you were going for it that week. But you've just scored 115, and you think, did that tempt you to think I'm not wild carding?
No,
none at all.
Nope.
So even though the fact that did really well and it shot you up to like 18,000 overall, no, still be aggressive and stick to the plan.
Yeah, I think as I've said a few times already, my thing is if I've got a plan, it's a plan for a reason. Don't let what you're doing affect that.
Yeah.
Those players did well because of the fixtures they had at that time, but then they're suboptimal going forward. Why hang on to them for that? If I've made the plan because of I wasn't wildcarding because I had a bad team. I was wildcarding because I had a plan for what was coming next, effectively. So for me, what they've just achieved makes no odds.
The 6 players between Arsenal and Liverpool got you 93 points that week. Have you dared to look back and see what you would have scored extra in game week 26 if you'd have waited an extra week and kept Salah, Nunez, and Trent, the 3 Liverpool you had?
No, I haven't. I suspect Mo Salah. I know. Yeah, I'm sure we'll come on to Mo Salah again later on. So yeah, I know Mo Salah. Yeah, may have punished me a little bit in that week.
So coming into this bench boost that you played in game week 29, you've now managed to rise up to 5k. The bench boost in 29 gets you up to 3,268 at a game week rank of 159, 137 -4 points in that game week, which included your bench boost, which scored a nice little 25. Is that a good return? Is that sort of return you'd be happy with?
More than happy. Yeah, I mean, for me, that's perfectly good. I think I look back and I know it's not fully representative, but it was the highest bench score I'd had all season. Was the bit we got bench boosted, so I can't complain on that.
It was for my missus as well. I had Callum Wilson on the bench, but I told her not to do it. What are you thinking then at that point? Because at that point, you've obviously, for the first time in the season, you've surpassed last year's total in terms of your overall. What are you thinking then? Does the target change? Does it become a case of, right, I'm now at the point of where my target was. Do I try and push on and go for a top 1,000 here? Or were you of the mindset of, I'm content here?
I'll be honest, I try not to think about it. I just continue to play the game. So I try not to. I set my goals at the start of the season, but I try not to play against them throughout the season. I very much try to continue to play each week as each week, rather than getting into the whole mindset of, oh, where am I? Am I doing the right thing? I feel for me it does cloud my decision making. So I'm much more in a try and get into a headspace of I pick the best players each week, and then the next week I will look again and I'll try and pick the best players for the following week.
But your mindset didn't change to think, oh, okay, I want to chase now and I want to go a bit more differential.
No.
So why did you have Alexander Isak on free hit in game week 32? James, that's your fault.
No, I think again, I think by 32, you are looking at that point where you're going, you've got to be a little bit differential, even to stay in that top 10k. And I think that's where I kind of got to. Obviously, having been there for 3 or 4 weeks by that point, you started to think, well, actually, I think by that point I'd actually started to slip slightly. I think I'd bounced around a little bit in the top 10k, and you are starting to think, actually, I need to do something just a touch different. Not,
So it did change a little bit.
yeah, but
Was
more,
it also because it's 1 week?
yeah,
Yeah.
very, very much. I think the wild card it is a case of the free hit you are picking for that week only, and you just go right. I pick the best players. If it goes wrong, it doesn't matter. I'm back where I was. The only matter is what you lose in that single game week.
So you went up to 3,600, then 75 in game week 33. And then I think we suffered a little bit with those that then come back into the wild card who were both coming into our teams and also having a slightly better team than what people like myself and you would have had. But great finish in the end, 3,972. Is that a negative in any way? That sounds like a ridiculous question, but I just mean that you were already there.
Yeah,
and it didn't kick on.
I think that the one big regret I've got is I've spoken to you before, but with game week 34, I went KDB over Mo Salah. I didn't take I could have taken an extra -4 to make it a -8 to get Salah in, and instead I opted for KDB, who then proceeded to return about 6 points over the next 4 game weeks. Whereas
And you kept
Mo
him
Salah,
through that period.
and I kept him through until 38. So I went KDB to Salah for 38. So I think with that's the one that I look at and go, yeah, that was the downside of being that little bit differential. That the herd went Salah. Salah was the obvious pick, and I sort of went, oh, I could save a -4 here and do something a bit different at the same time.
That's interesting. So that it's the points hit that's probably
Yeah.
influenced that. If you'd have had the straight choice, just Salah, KDB 3.
Salah every time.
Yeah, that's interesting, that, because he's such a powerful player, right? And it's also interesting to reflect on your season as an overview and see that Mo Salah was one of the players that did best for you and was also the player that hurt you the most.
Yeah.
How does that come about?
Well, I suspect it was doing well at the start, because obviously I started with Salah and Haaland when Salah wasn't necessarily as popular at the beginning. So I started with him there. And then, yeah, obviously he kicked me at the end in those last 4 or 5 game weeks when I decided to go against him.
Yeah, the player that did best for you, it's just interesting to throw a few names out. The player that did best for you across the season in terms of your gain versus the rest of the top 10k was Gabriel Martinelli. Did you have him pretty much from game week 1 all the way to the injury?
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah.
I think he did well. Yeah, I think there were a few sort of odds and ends players. I think little Buendia for a couple of weeks off the back of the second wild card did quite nicely for me. So I had him for those couple of little hauls. A few odds and ends like that worked quite nicely. Obviously, ironically, Ben White as the best defender, which I think sums up my style of play quite a lot. I think we resonate quite a lot there with our style of play.
Yeah, and it's interesting. KDB is actually in your top 5 for gain as well across the season. I know it was pretty much a differential throughout the season. That's interesting. And Kepa, who was the scourge for many people off that period of the unlimited that you went with, and probably kept your head above water a little bit, because there was 1 or 2 weeks it felt like he was the damage and was the only damage, and that's why I was looking at Reds. What made you decide to go with him? Was it just a case of that extra fixture?
Yeah, I think it's the extra fixture. I think I'm sure some will disagree, but I kept having that belief that Chelsea would come good at some point. It was one of those.
You and me both.
But you are looking at it going, Chelsea have got to come good. Chelsea have got a 4.5 goalkeeper for Chelsea is too good to be true almost. So I'll go there, and it turned out it wasn't too good to be true. But in what he did me some good at least.
Yeah, we mentioned obviously Salah, Kane hurt you quite a bit for the period you didn't have, and Martin Odegaard another one. Was that an influence of, because I can see in your team there's quite a few periods you got Martinelli and Saka together. Is it just a case therefore that Odegaard was never the choice for you?
Yeah, I don't think I owned Odegaard at all season. I think for me he was, I think he was the least attacking of the 3. So having started with Martinelli, I'll be honest, I did very, very nearly do the switch when Martinelli went off the second time and went big, and I very nearly got on the straight Odegaard to Martinelli to Odegaard that week. But again, the points hit put me off doing that. So it worked out in that case.
If someone can hear a child, yes, the Zoom studio has just been invaded by my child. You want to say hello, mate? Just at least say hello if you're going to be here, or go back to mummy. Chris, I think that's a very good place to leave it, mate. Where can everyone follow you on the Bird app?
So I'm at FPL_Coke_0.
Good man. It's okay. We're wrapping up. Yeah, say bye. Well done, mate. Chris, thank you. And thank you for all the support you give us on Patreon as well. Although, as we found out, I'm paying you more money than you're paying me now. Congratulations on winning the Advanced Tier Mini League, and very best of luck to Blackburn and yourself next season. Obviously, Blackburn won't be in FPL, but good luck to Blackburn Championship and yourself in FPL. What have we got coming up tomorrow? I'll be doing Ask James stream, last one of the season. Come and join me. I believe that's going to be 12 p.m. UK time on YouTube with an audio to follow after. But otherwise, just leaves me to say thank you so much to Chris. Cue music, please, man, child.